Okay, how to play my song In Your Hands. Now, I'm using my nylon string classical guitar here, but you can play it on whatever, your steel string or your electric guitar, whatever you've got to hand. The first thing to say is that I have a capo on fret 1. Now, you don't have to have a capo, you can do it without it, but if you want to jam with me in this tutorial, or if you want to jam with me along to the record, then the key that it's in is with a capo on the first fret. The second thing to say, or the third thing to say, is that I tune the low E string down to what's called a drop D. Yeah, so I'm assuming most of you people tuning into this already play a bit guitar, so you're going to know some terms like drop D tuning. So that is a D, an A, a D, a G, a B, and an E, with of course the capo on the first fret. So In Your Hands, I'm really happy to teach this song and give you guys all my secrets, because it's one of my absolute favourite guitar patterns. It's a guitar pattern I've had for quite a long time. Like in fact, even going back to 2014 when I was making my first album, First Mind, I had this guitar pattern and I was thinking that it was going to be one of the major songs on that record, but the song never seemed to wanted to get written. I couldn't seem to finish it or get the lyrics, and I lived with it and as a kind of unfinished idea for many years until its season came with this album that I released last September called Wake Up Now. So the song is In Your Hands, and the guitar pattern I've had for a long time, and I really love it. It's got all the hallmarks of the way I love to play the guitar. It's an intricate picking pattern. It's quite, I think it's quite a difficult picking pattern to learn. So I just want to say that from the start. I imagine people of different levels of ability are going to be watching these videos, and so yeah, you should know from the start that this is, I think, quite intricate. So that's what I'm going to start now with, a kind of simplified or kind of cheat version of how to play it in your hands. So at the very least, you can play along with me. So the simplified version starts with the D chord. It's very simple. The A chord and an E minor 7 chord. Now, of course, when you've got that drop D, your E minor 7 chord is not normally how you would do it. You have to make a slight adjustment to make an E minor 7 in the drop D. So the way I make my E minor 7, which is the third chord of this song, is my middle finger is on is 1, 2. Middle finger is the second fret up from the capo on the low E, and my fourth finger is the second fret up from the capo on the A string, and it's this chord. That's a kind of E minor 7 shape. So it's a D major shape, an A major shape, and an E minor 7 shape. Really simple, like a million pop songs. Bob Dylan's Knocking on Heaven's Door, etc., 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 all use these chords. And in fact, they're some of my favourite chords, simple as they are. So let's just jam those together. And I'm doing a simple strumming in my right hand. I won't say too much about it at this point. You can just kind of feel your way into it with me. Yeah? It's going to go like this. And we'll do that again. D major shape, A major shape, E minor 7 shape. And with the lyrics, just so you know what I'm saying, it goes, see them come together, or they would not be apart. For every other there's another, that is the only way to start. Can live as one as lovers, live as two as enemies. So many never know the difference. Come step in the dark with me, with the pale light in your hands, before I understand how loving can be. With the pale light in your hands, before I understand how it can be. So these three chords are good for the intro, they're good for the first verse, they're good for the chorus, second verse, all the way until the bridge. And the bridge is very simple. It's a kind of, you go to the fourth chord, if anyone uses that kind of terminology, chord 4, which is a sort of G. Obviously, like, we've got the capo on 1, so technically it's a G sharp if you're talking to a bassist or to a pianist. But the G shape I'd normally make in standard tuning is that. That should be very familiar to everybody. That's a G shape. But of course we are in the drop D tuning, so it is a it's like that. So I put my little finger on the 5th fret up from the capo on the low E. I put my index finger 2 frets up from the capo on the A string. I don't bother putting my fingers anywhere on these high strings because I'm going to focus my strumming on these low chords here. So you go like that, and then the next chord is that same E minor 7 shape. So this is the part of the song where I sing calling out. I sing the words calling out quite high. I'm going to do it an octave lower here right now, so as to not embarrass myself or anyone. And you'll be familiar, if you know the track, this will be familiar to you. So the bridge goes calling out, yeah, calling out, yeah, calling out, yeah. And from here back to the verse, with the pale light in your hands, before I understand just how loving can be. With the moonlight in your hands, before I understand how it can be. So that should give you everything you need to do a very simplified version of In Your Hands. If you just want to jam it with your friends, if you just want to have the basic understanding of how the song works, that's it. I'm going to move quite quickly in this tutorial because there's quite a lot of detail in there to cover, and leave it up to you in your own time to stop it, go back, repeat sections, anything you want to spend more time on. That's the whole point of these of recording these for the YouTube. And I think, as we found out earlier today in the Sunday live Instagram live lesson that I did with so many of you tuned in, was that this piece of music, when we get now into the beyond the kind of simplified cheap version, this guitar part is quite dense. The way it's quite intricate, the way the picking part is. So I'm going to dive in and go quite quickly with it. Okay. First of all, before we get into this right hand picking pattern, which is the key, which is what it's all about, I'm going to show you the left hand so you understand the slightly more sophisticated voicings I'm doing there with this left hand. So of course the first chord is a version of a D shape, but I'm doing it like this. And let me do it slowly. I'll go from here. In fact, I'm doing it like this. So have a good look at that right here. Just to be clear, my index finger is on the 2nd fret up from the capo on the G string. My middle finger is the 3rd fret up from the capo on the B string. My ring finger is the 4th fret up from the capo on the D string. And my little finger is the 5th fret up from the capo on the A string. And I'm strumming the root note here. So with that open E at the top there. Okay? So that's my first home chord, that's the root. The second chord is again a version of this one, but it's a particularly nice version. If I say so myself, I think this is a really sweet chord. It's this. It's got this kind of semitone crush, this chord. It's got a crush in the middle of this chord. So index finger is the second fret up from the capo on the B string. Fourth finger is 4 frets up from the capo on the D string. And you don't strum this low note because the root of this chord is in fact the A string. So it's like this. And the third chord is pretty much that same E minor shape that I just showed you. It's here. But more often than not, I also embellish it with the 7th degree of the scale up here as well with my little finger, which is 3rd fret up from the capo on the B string. Amazing. That is the 3rd chord. So once again, that goes like this. See them come together. Oh, they would not be apart. And so on. Now, before I jump into the right hand, I think the best thing for me to do is to just play this whole pattern through. So to give you a good kind of illustration of what we're aiming for, so you can kind of like see it and have a good look at it, and then I'll break it down and we'll go into it. So this is how it goes, and I'll do it slightly slower so you can just see it. And the bridge section. So I can already feel as I'm playing that bridge section there that this is probably going to stretch my ability as a teacher, because I'm very self-taught. I haven't ever done much of this kind of teaching, and so I'm just kind of working my way through this as we're doing it. And that there, all of this pattern, in fact all of my playing, is very instinctive. I don't necessarily think about it when I'm doing it, particularly with the right hand. It just kind of happens. So breaking it down into all its parts is a bit counterintuitive to me, and I can do things instinctively and with feeling and from beyond the mind that are much more complex than I can do with my mind. So that when I go backwards and I break them down and I try and explain them to you, which I will do, sometimes they can be quite complicated. And that's something I find really interesting, but we don't need to digress into that right now. What I'm saying is, bear with me whilst I try and teach this, because I'm working this out as I go. Okay? So that said, let's leave the B section for a minute. Let's go back to those first chords. And in fact, lead the left hand alone. We're going to mute it. Just gently put your fingers across it, kind of put it to one side. And now we're going to focus on this right hand. Now I'm going to show you it again, this time just percussively. Now I think this is a really good example of how I always feel like ultimately I'm a drummer, and I'm a drummer at the guitar. Not because I tap the body or do any of that percussion stuff, but because the way I think about the picking patterns is very much in the similar patterns to drum beats, and I grew up playing drums. I always think of myself as a drummer. And here, I think anyone can kind of hear that beat, you know. And if you'll excuse my terrible beatboxing, I think it goes a boom boom chap bit 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 chap bit dum dum chak good chak dum dum chak good chak dum dum. Okay, and what there is, in a way, in a manner of speaking, you could say that the thumb is the kick drum doing a boom boom a boom a boom boom boom, something like that. The middle finger and the index finger work together, and they are kind of like the snare, just going on the beats 2 and beats 4, going. It's like 1, 2, 4, 1, 2. And in the middle is the dynamo. This is the kind of thing that gives it all the pace, and it's this kind of offbeat index finger, which I think of as kind of like the hi-hat. That's just to explain this analogy with it being like a drum beat. Okay, so once again, you've got the kick drum going. That's with the snare in. And now here's that index finger. Sorry, I'm confusing myself. Let me do that again. Okay, so now I'm going to break this down even further so you understand it. Okay, so the way my hand is resting is with my thumb on this lower E string here, and you've probably seen already that it does move between these 2 strings. It never strikes both at the same time, but it does move between the 2. My index finger stays pretty exclusively on this D string, and these 2 operate as one, and they are on the G string here and the B string here. So that's kind of where my hand rests in this initial opening chord. And from here I'm going to break down each finger. The thumb, we'll start with the thumb, or the kick drum. The thumb goes, it starts with 2 down beats going boom, boom. Again, I'm muting this left hand, it goes. And then we move up to 3 kind of more syncopated hits on the A string. So that together goes. Now I find it easier to skip over the index finger for a second and jump to these 2 in operation. So once again, these ones, as I've said already, operate together and they just hit the 2 and the 4 beat. 1, 2, 3. So together, that sounds like. And the index finger does this constant upstroke, which is really syncopated and is the engine of the picking pattern. And in fact, it's the engine of the whole track, because it really is where the groove originates from, and what gives it this propulsion and this forward motion and this restless sense, this movement. You know? So watch this. What it does is it goes 2, 3, and. I don't know if you can hear my foot down here tapping. I hope you can, because then you can hear how that index finger runs on its own syncopation contrary to it, and it goes. Yeah? So we're going to go, here's the thumb again, and the snare. I'm going to slow it down, and here comes the index. Fuck's sake. Okay. And I'm going to slow this right down now. that there, what I've just done quite slowly, is the bulk of the picking pattern in its right hand rhythmical form, right? Now I'm going to combine it with that opening chord, and it will start to make sense. In fact, what I do is I leave off my fourth finger to make it just open ones and fifths. So it's a stack of fifths, basically, a stack of ones and fifths. In taking off the fourth finger, I take away the major third, right? If that makes sense to anybody, it means that we start in this kind of ambiguous place. It's a bit like Paul McCartney's Yesterday. It starts with like, yesterday, all my troubles seems or whatever. We start there. Can you see that picking pattern there? And then we go. So one thing to say at this point is that a small adjustment happens to the picking pattern when, of course, we go to the second chord, because the root of this chord is the A string, and it would very much muddy the definition of the chord if we kept on striking the low E. So when I strike on the second chord, this one, I strike the A string, goes. And I recognise that it's taken me quite a lot of years of playing to develop the accuracy just to hit that A string from quite a distance with my thumb, but that's what we're aiming for. This is how the pattern works. So once again, yeah, here is the picking pattern in its rhythmical form. Boom, boom, ba-da, ba-ba, ba-da, ba-dee-be-dum, ba-ja, ba-ba, ba-ja, ba. Okay, and here it is with the chord. Here it is actually, as I do it on the record, without the major third. And then we bring in the third here. I think it's kind of magical. Now, that's probably enough for most people, but just because I'm like this, I added in another layer on top of that even as well. And that other layer is a little flick of the wrist, which is a tiny moment of strumming tucked in within the picking pattern, right? It almost feels like that picking pattern couldn't take any more notes, you know. Boom, it's quite full. But one afternoon I'd been playing it for years, and I just found there was one little more elegant twist I could do it. It's a flick of the wrist that strums up this high open E string. Okay, so watch this. And that completes the strumming pattern for these chords, which are the intro, the verses, and the choruses of In Your Hands. See them come together, or they would not be apart. For every other there's another, and that's the only way to start. With the pale light in your hand, for understand loving can be. With the pale light in your hand. Let me slow down that last little picking pattern for you, okay? I'm going to do that one more time for you again. Now the bridge. Okay, and I didn't get to this point in the Instagram live earlier because it was just hours long by this point, and so this is the first time I've ever kind of like slowed this down and really looked at it, you know. So let's just do it together in real time. What we do, as I showed you earlier, is we go here. Now I believe the right hand doesn't really change much. We're going to go. But what gets involved now is what are called hammer-ons and hammer-offs. Yeah. Again, I presume a lot of you following this deep into the video, 26 minutes, you're going to be already guitarists. Yes, you're going to know what I mean by a hammer-off, a hammer-on. It's when the left hand kind of movement in the left hand gets involved in the plucking of the strings. You know. So this now happens. We go. So what happens, yeah, let me just play this middle section first so you can have a look at what we're aiming for. Okay, it goes like this. So, part of me hopes that some of you instinctive guitarists out there can have a look at what I'm doing slightly slower and just pick it up. Maybe that's wishful thinking because I'm not exactly sure how to break this down, but let's just start. Yeah, the right hand is the same as before. So if you're getting to know the right hand, if it's becoming comfortable, if it's starting to become fluent, this picking pattern, then it doesn't change for this middle section. But as I said, what it combines with is this hammer on, so we create this extra note. So the G shape is made like this, and what hinges here is the fourth finger coming onto the A string 4 frets up from the capo. We get that. It's kind of a, what is it? Phrygian, maybe? Maybe it's Mixolydian scale or some shizzle, I don't know. So it goes. So that's the first thing, and then we have this little finger. Do. And then we go down and we do the same thing on the E minor chord. So for anybody who has seen my YouTube lesson of my song Meet Me There, or indeed who a few weeks ago was on the Instagram live tutorial of that song, you'll notice that in a way this middle section plays a similar game to the middle section of that song, which is to say we go to the 4th degree and we play around with these, with this whole tone thing there. So let me do it really slowly, and then I will leave you to keep exploring it. So here it goes. it's a bit like riding a bike, you know. Like I'm trying to ride so slowly, but like if it goes slowly, it falls over. It needs the motion to kind of like make sense. So obviously, I know I'm slowing it down so you can see it. So that's why I'm doing it, but it's hard for me actually. Calling out, yeah, calling out, yeah, yeah, yeah. Na na ye na 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 ye na na ye na na ye na. The pale light in your hands, for understand how loving can be. The pale light in your hands, for understand how it can be. A vicious craving in my bones, a needing was burning in my mind, and it kept me one step away from something I could not find. Until I looked inside my aching heart and saw a hive of honeybees, making honey from my darkness, gold from my disease. And so now I seek and know the world is a lover, know the world is an enemy. Oh, so many never know the difference. Come step in the dark with me and bring the pale light in your hands, for understand how loving can be. With the pale light in your hands, for understand how it can be. All the way. This hand is the engine. It just keeps going. That's the key thing to learn. Good luck. I hope you have fun learning this song. I hope you share this video with your friends who are also learning to play the guitar. I want everybody who would like to know about this to know about it. Thank you for watching this video. Write some comments beneath it. Tell me what worked, what didn't work. I know I'm working quite quickly, but I want you in your own time to stop it, go back, change it. Tell me underneath this in the comments what other songs of mine you'd like to learn. It's my intention to keep doing this and as a consistent and continuous thing. So like
in time we'll get through every song, you know. But I'd love to hear from you what you'd like to learn. I hope this has been useful, and it's an opportunity for me to give something back to you, my listeners and my fans, because I love you and I'm grateful. So have a great day. Peace.